13-year-old boy disappeared after leaving his girlfriend's house and planning to hitchhike home. What happened to Keith Dean Fleming? Keith Dean Fleming was born on the 18th of September 1963 to Donald and Maria Fleming. Keith was the youngest out of the Fleming children. He had two older brothers, Eugene and Gerald. Keith went to Roosevelt Middle School, where he was apparently known as a rebel. Keith embraced the surfer lifestyle, and he would frequent Cocoa Beach Pier to go surfing. Keith also enjoyed rock music and biking. On the 28th of April 1977, in Cocoa Beach, Brevard County, Florida, Keith Fleming went missing after spending a day swimming with his girlfriend, Gina. Keith had to be home for dinner, so he and Gina rode her bike, with her on the handlebars, to the end of Osceola Lane, where it intersects with State Road A1A. Keith began walking south along SR A1A and intended to hitchhike the rest of the 2 miles home. When Gina returned home, she told her mother Keith was going to hitchhike back home, and her mother got in the car and went looking for Keith, wanting to drive him home herself, but she couldn't locate him. Note, what I will say next really confused me. His brothers were named Eugene and Gerald, but in this paragraph I read from it says his brother Jeff. I don't know if Jeff is a nickname for Eugene or Gerald, or even if one of his brothers was called Jeff, and the writer didn't mean to put Eugene or Gerald, but I was very confused, so I'll just say his brother. Keith was supposed to go with his brother later that evening to the restaurant where their mother, Maria, worked, but his brother turned up alone and told Maria that he didn't see Keith. Maria knew something was wrong immediately because Keith always called whenever he would be late. They went straight to the Cocoa Beach police and explained what happened, but the police insisted that Keith had just run away and would turn up again later, even though he had taken no belongings and was only wearing flip-flops at the time. The police didn't make an attempt to look for Keith. They only put a bolo, be on the lookout for him, and stuck to the runaway theory. The police didn't speak to Keith's girlfriend, Gina, the last person to see him, until 1993. Keith had some minor issues. His parents had caught him with marijuana and forced him to go to a drug therapy center called Alternatives. Some sources say he was staying there at the time of disappearance. They had promised that if he stayed on the straight path, they would buy him a new surfboard, and Maria says that he attended and he listened. Keith was 13 years old, his height was 50, his weight was between 91–10 pounds. He had lost his top 2 front teeth and he wore a partial plate. He had a recently healed broken left leg. Keith had brown eyes and shoulder-length straight blonde hair, but some sources say it had been trimmed recently before his disappearance. He had full lips. He was wearing a green t-shirt with Thirsty Turtle on it, blue jeans, and flip-flops. He wore a gold chain with an Italian horn. In 1978 and 1979, Maria received a series of phone calls, and she says she knows it was Keith and recognized his voice. When she answered the first call, she heard a lot of noise in the background, and then a voice said, "I just want to talk to my mom," before the line went dead. The second call simply said, "I love you," before hanging up, and the third call said, "Help me." The Fleming family had received prank calls before, but Maria feels that these calls were different. Theories. A theory from Maria. Maria's first thought when she learned Keith had gone missing was of the Flower Girls. For several weeks, Cocoa Beach had been flooded by members of the Unification Church, known as the Moonies, and they would stand on the side of the road selling carnations and looking for donations. When driving with Keith one time, some of the girls waved at him and he waved back, telling Maria they were just some friends of his. At the time, it didn't concern Maria, but it remained in her thoughts after his disappearance. The magazine. In 1980, an inmate in a Georgia prison saw a picture of Keith in a newspaper article about his case, and he immediately recognized his face from a magazine featuring gay models. There was apparently a lengthy article featuring a young man who bore a striking resemblance to how Keith would look a few years older. He sent a copy of the magazine to Maria and to the police, but they were unable to trace the magazine's origins, and it was a dead end. I am skeptical about whether the police actually made much effort to trace this publication. It should have been relatively simple to find the origins of a magazine that was doing the rounds of a prison and locate the people who wrote the articles. Maria says that she was the only person who thought this person was Keith. The police didn't feel it was him and never followed it up properly, but by this time they had another theory as to what happened to Keith. From https://neverseenagain, wordpress.com/2024/10/25/ Keith Fleming/. John McRae. A suspect in Keith's case is the serial killer John McRae. McRae worked as a guard at a juvenile detention facility in Florida, where he admitted he often watched boys surf on the beach. From McRae's wiki. Following his conviction, McRae was transferred to the Michigan Reformatory in Ionia, where he learned the trade of an auto mechanic and underwent several sex offender rehabilitation programs. During his incarceration, he never exhibited violent tendencies, was never disciplined, and was considered a model prisoner. In 1971, after a series of decisions by the Supreme Court questioned the imposition of the death penalty and life without parole on juvenile offenders, Governor William Milliken commuted McRae's sentence to life imprisonment with a chance of parole by executive order. McRae was paroled from prison on February 2, 1972, after spending 21 years behind bars. He then moved to Crystal, Michigan with his mother, where, with the support of his mother, he soon found housing and work. In 1973, he married Barbara Ann Heckman, who gave birth to his son Martin in 1974. The following year, McRae was finally allowed to leave Michigan, moving to Brevard County, Florida, to work as a guard at a juvenile detention facility. One theory purports that McRae provided fake documents that concealed his criminal record upon entering the institution. For the remainder of his stay in Florida, McRae came under police suspicion several times in connection with the disappearances of local children. On April 28, 1977, 13-year-old Keith Fleming vanished from Cocoa Beach after last being seen on the highway near a beach, just a few hundred yards from McRae's house. While McRae was questioned regarding the case, he was never arrested as no direct evidence indicated his responsibility. Fleming's body was never found. 2 years later, McRae came under police scrutiny again after 12-year-old Kipling Randolph Hess III disappeared. Hess was last seen alive on March 27, 1979, walking on his way to school in the Merritt Island area. However, he never showed up to class that day and was declared missing. Upon leaving home, the boy left a note addressed to his parents that read, "Goodbye, Mom and Dad." During the investigation, McRae became the main and only suspect in his disappearance, as it was determined that he and his son Martin had met Hess at a Catholic church carnival a few days prior to his disappearance. As in the Housey case, McRae joined the volunteer searches and assisted police in the search right up to the time he became a suspect. After the search ended, McRae was questioned while his apartment and the interior of his car were searched. Despite this, no evidence implicating him in Hess's disappearance was uncovered, and Hess remains missing. His body has never been found. Ending note, I'm really sorry if there's any spelling errors in this. I tried to make everything neat and good to read, and I did proofread, but there may still be some mistakes. Another thing I apologize for is if the spacing layout doesn't look so good on non-mobile devices. Drop your verdict in the comments. Wait, what?